What up?
Hey.
I told you it was going to be loud and annoying, brother. Welcome to the show, Mikey. It's a familiar name. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Dude, I am so stoked for this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw, my Twitter account got hacked, and so I finally got it back over the last month, and I've been really kind of ramping up my content since then. And so this is our first big week. I got 3 podcasts in a row. You're the first out of it. I'm freaking jazzed.
Let's go.
Before we get to your formal introduction, just a little update about what's going on. Thank you, viewers, for already turning in. This is going to be one of the best podcasts we've had. I already feel it because Mikey and I had a great intro call. Felt like we're a little bit of kindred spirits, and I just love AI. And I think I can't wait to have the conversation of, and I say this all the time. I'm going to go a little off cuff here, Mikey, because I need to ask you this question sooner than later. I feel like if I interviewed 100 people in the streets of New York and said, do you realize how quickly AI is just going to slap you across the face and fundamentally change your life? I think one person might say yes. What are your thoughts there? Like, how oblivious do you think people are to how quickly this is going to rapidly change our world? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that most people, like if you think about a population bell curve, right? Like that middle chunk is not aware yet, right? They have no idea.
Not even aware.
No. They're aware of it like a parlor trick. But people are in a spot in their lives where they're not really thinking about like how things work, right? They're thinking about what's the drama in my life, they're just thinking that way, and they're not thinking systematically. And most people are not ready for this.
And we'll get to the manifestation of what that actually looks like as well too. And I don't understand, because like news headlines last week, it's like Amazon's laying 15,000 people off because of AI and AI using, managing their logistics in the warehouses. Like, people are reading this and I don't think they're still comprehending it, which is out of control to me. But I can't wait to have that conversation because it is coming. It's inevitable. Before that, in the introduction with Mikey, a little bit about me. This is the only time I'll talk about me in the podcast, but yes, again, Twitter account hacked. I'm back. I will reiterate this. I was on a space earlier. People, I cannot stress enough the importance of your network. The only reason I have my account back is because of that. Twitter's help desk is absolute bullshit. Elon's spending his time not on his companies, what he probably should. And he needs to figure out, because by the way, Apple has 2.5 billion active devices on this planet. And I was talking to a human in 15 minutes. If they can do that, Elon can figure out how to help a guy that is paying for his service to get his account back. But that's enough about my rant. Hacked Twitter account really pissed me off. But thank you for my network. You guys are incredible. Best thing I've spent my time by far in the last 4 years. Over 1,000 conversations on the phone. People are what continue to progress, help you learn and grow. Cannot stress that enough. As far as guests, we have the beautiful Mikey today. We have Kevin from Project O coming on Friday. We have Max from Sperdict tomorrow. We also have Dith from Gigaverse coming up next week, and a plethora of other really top tier people in the Web3 space, anywhere ranging from AI, DeFi, NFTs, to just general Web3 entrepreneurs. So Mikey G isn't stopping. I've got another space series that's probably going to launch with some legends back in OG space 2021 times. So we're cooking hard now that Mikey G's back. And that is, I think, me in a nutshell. So let's get on to the man, the myth, the legend. Mikey, you have like such a robust background. I feel like I'm going to do you a disservice, but we're still going to give it a shot here. So Mikey, literally 17-year founder, 3-time exit machine. I love how you put that, by the way, and one of the sharpest minds in AI today. I think I actually put that. He's built companies from zero to acquisition, delivered tons and tons of stuff to major brands like Nike, Toyota, and then also, and this is where I got it wrong, did lead the global AI standards in the UN. How did I do, brother? Is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I was a delegate to the United Nations their global program, but ML ops, like the way that you get these models from laboratory into worldwide usage.
Yeah.
This was back in
So
2017.
just quick note, you're gonna wanna. I think your gain might be turned a little bit up. So if you're leaning back, your voice is cutting out. So just be cognizant of how close you are to your mic.
You got it. There we go. Is that better?
Yes, I'll let you know if you cut out again. So say that again a little bit, because you said a UN delegate and then you kept on cutting in and out.
Oh yeah, delegate to the United Nations Global Data Program. Like, if you want to think about the kind of stuff we were doing, is around the globe there's farms, right? And how do you make sure that the food gets to the places where there's hunger, but not to the places where people have that good already? And so our AI would actually look at the entire world and say, where's millet or sorghum going to be low, and our AI systems actually let the UN know, like, hey, this is how you help people in sub-Saharan Africa or wherever. So that was kind of the early cutting my teeth in AI.
Dude, that is so incredible, because I think it was Percival that was on, and he made the similar point, right? That like, we produce, at least in America and Canada, we have plenty enough food. We just are horrible at getting it to where it needs to go. And the amount of food waste is insane. AI is excellent at managing large systems. Do you agree with that? Anything to layer on that, or does that all make sense to you?
AI can be excellent at any task that somebody's giving it. It can be excellent at evil. It can be excellent at good. It can be excellent at a lot of things, but it's certainly a tool that is the most powerful tool we've ever created.
Yeah, by far, hands down. And so the most important part, and I can't wait to hear this from your own perspective, but you do have a fun little fact for the audience that has probably never heard about you. So hit me, man.
I mean, I've got pioneer blood, right? So like, I'm always like, I'm in Seattle. I'm trying to get as far over and away as possible before you hit the water. And so my family first came over like on, around the Mayflower times to Plymouth as pilgrims. They were, doing the pioneer thing all across the East. And then, had one grandpa who came across. He was actually Joseph Smith, the Mormon founders. He was actually his bodyguard.
Wow.
And so they came in. He was the founder of Ogden, Utah, and then founded a whole bunch of places all over kind of that Utah, Idaho. And the other side came from Scandinavia, and they started fishing in Seattle in the 1800s. So pioneers. My parents were kind of the same way. My dad working at Apple, and my mom was a clothing designer working with folks like Valentino and International News and Britannia. So lots of pioneering and lots of startups in my world.
Dude, what's great is you're one of the few ones that didn't just go like off the cuff, like total just kind of out there icebreaker. You just gave us a perfect segue into what this podcast is going to be about. And mainly it's going to be about you. And I think, and I say this a lot of podcasts, maybe not every podcast, what you're about to do is so beautiful in the sense that someone is deeply going to resonate with you. Maybe you have the same heritage that you just talked about, but they're going to see that you have already cultivated AI to change the world and using AI to do good and be a good human being, right? And it's fundamentally going to change their life, give them hope. Maybe they just completely change and go deep into AI, all based on this simple conversation. So I can't wait. And the way that we get there is very simple. One question, man. How'd you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me episode 1, 2, and 3. To reiterate, for the audience that has never heard this style or podcast before, we will recap. Episode 1 is childhood. I'm very deeply fascinated because I think childhood is obviously the foundation to everybody's life. There are profound impacts that you have as a child that help mold you to the human being you are today. Vivid memories. Were you a tinkerer? Mantras from relatives, parents, whatever, that still stick in your brain today. So big questions, start wherever you want. Episode 2, we will naturally flow into episode 2. Episode 2 is your schooling, your professional career. What skill sets gained, mainly through failures, is what I'm interested in because of these insights, these aha moments for you that kind of really helped and prepped you to say, hey, I want to do this AI thing. Web3 is now a thing because of the AI. What are you currently doing now? and what does the next 3 to 6 months look like? That is it, my friend. This is the format. Let's have at episode 1. Cannot wait to hear it, brother.
Let's go.
So, where do you want to start on episode 1? Tell me about, let's say, do you think you go to a vivid memory first, or do you go to kind of the influence of the parental figures or the relatives? Where would you like to start there?
Yeah, I think a good way to say it is I grew up in a neighborhood where at one point in time I had 8 cousins all going to the same bus stop.
Love it. Love it.
So super close family. Everybody lived, pretty close to each other. Grandmas, grandpas, everybody.
Right.
This is both sides of the family united. So super supportive. My parents were very young when they had me.
Yeah.
And they were both entrepreneurs. So my dad went from being a teacher to working for Apple Computer, being like an evangelist type person. Right. So he would travel around the Western US, kind of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, and put on these events where he would show people what computers could do. And I was little Mikey, and they would put me up on stage as like 3 years old, right? And they would be like, oh, here's Mikey showing the latest technology and how to use it. And it was kind of like, look what computers are going to enable us to do. And so from a young age, that was kind of like, I would get up there. I've got a picture of me sitting on top of a whole bunch of original Macs. I think there's like $4 million worth of Macs in that room. And it was like, that was my first big sale.
Dude, that is so incredible. Now, obviously at the time, you're just thinking this is cool. You probably don't even remember those actual, a majority of those times, but reflecting on this, man, that like not everybody gets to live a cool childhood like that. What do you think that did for you? Did it spark because I love talking about innovation and the impact that creativity has on that. Did it start sparking, you think, your curiosity, your creative passion? What does that look like to you with having those impacts?
Yeah, I mean, I always had the tools and like a hyper supportive network of people that tried to help me push myself. Mm-hmm. So like my dad and uncle both worked for Apple. And so I would be at their office, and all of their all of the employees, because my uncle was the boss, would like take me under the wing too and just be like, hey, let's build a game in HyperCard, or hey, let's do animation in this new system. And so I think it was really empowering. It also probably gave me an unreasonable expectation about how little I'm willing to put up with bullshit and like live in someone else's system.
Ooh, talk to me. Peel that back a little bit. Talk to me about that. Like, again, looking at that, is it the bullshit in the sense of you just don't want to be told what to do, or you think you can make things better, or you didn't want the handcuffs on because you wanted to be creative, you were excited to be innovative? Like, talk to me a little bit about that, because that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, it's probably the arbitrariness of most authority isn't right. And so I think there's this innate thing of like, I've often been around people that just impress me and they've earned my respect. And then you get put in a situation where somebody hasn't earned your respect and you're stuck under their authority. Right. And that's hard for me. I'm sure I'm not neurotypical. I'm sure that I have, there are certain things about me. And when I need to try to change myself to match someone else's rules, that's not when you get the best out of me. That's when I'm drawing.
But I think, and here's a deep question, and I think this is I can't wait to get your answer on this one. I actually think most humans are wired that way, right? Especially if there's no respect, or you're being told what to do on something that you don't agree with. The question is, why do people let that happen? And my brain immediately goes to safety, right? Like, even though it's frustrating, it's the easier thing to do. What are your concepts on like why people still choose to be in that shitty situation? Whereas me and you, I'm kind of in a current situation like that right now, but I have the outlet of my side hustles to keep me from going crazy. But like, if that was the only scenario and circumstance I'd be in, I'd be gone in 3 seconds. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm really fascinated as to why people even deal with it.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people like to know what the expectations are, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of people like look at social status and what it's going to take to reach their goals, and strategy of fitting in is oftentimes the best one. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and like that has its own set of things, but like when you're more in the world of I've always survived by taking the risk, by going out and doing the thing, by getting on the stage, by making, making the Hail Mary pass at the last minute, like you kind of get in a spot where you see the advantages of that. And
Yeah.
then like you also feel like I mean, you can feel the pain of that too, right? Like
Mhm,
when you're
mhm.
not always in stable situations, when you're willing to go take risks and
Yeah.
risk
Yeah.
no pay for a long time while you figure the next thing out, like
Yeah.
that's the life on the edge.
Yeah, and this is jumping forward ahead, but it's just a natural segue into like I like what you talked about, and I've had this conversation a lot throughout this podcast. But to truly do something great, you need 5 years minimum, in my mind, more likely a decade. And when you're taking these big risks, I've had entrepreneurs on here saying like, that's a quarter of my working career gone. Now, obviously, they're learning a lot, but like some people never come back from that. So how do you look at this like massive risk that you're taking and being comfortable to push yourself forward? Like, because it's just not for everybody, but you've obviously put yourself in this position. So I'm interested on your insights there.
Yeah, I mean, everything starts out like somewhat progressive, right? It starts off as an idea, and there's kind of like this idea that starts to line up with your almost like your moral worldview, right? And you're
Mm,
like, this thing has to happen.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that you start off by seeing or I start off, I should say, not you, me. I
Yeah.
start off by seeing kind of the what's the map, right? How
Right.
does this world work? How are things connected to one another? Where am I on the map?
Right.
Um, and then as you start to explore a new product you're going to build or a new protocol you're going to design,
Right.
um, once you start to see enough things line up, you're like, oh, this has to happen. Like right now, like I am on a mission right now to make sure that people who want to own their intelligence can.
Yes.
Because like right now, good luck going and finding an AI that's not spying on you.
Oh,
Right. Just
dude.
for example.
People do not realize that the surveillance state is at full capacity right now, right? Yeah, and
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 no matter what your politics are, right? Like in the last few years, you've had somebody in office that you probably hated,
yep,
right? And the same goes with most every company. And they don't care about you. They actually are trying to achieve their own objectives. And that probably doesn't mean keeping you safe and making sure you have a job in the future.
no, not at all. I mean, I'm literally actively trying to figure that out for my larger company, knowing that like if I just sit around and twiddle my thumbs, that's out the job's out the window. Like everything's out the window. It's wild. I love that insight. Where I want to shift though to is back to episode 1. Really interested in your uh, response on this. Advantages and disadvantages of having exposure at such a young age to just these really intelligent people, but like really pressing on the entrepreneurship button. Like looking back, what are your thoughts there?
One thing is that I didn't have a lot of pressure to be something else.
Ooh,
Right. So I think a lot of people have like they almost have to wear a mask, right? To be like, in my family, I have to be this person. At
yeah,
work, I have to be that person. At church, I need to be this person. At
right,
school, I'm that. And I kind of had the freedom from that to be me. And actually it was celebrated. Actually, it was celebrated to the degree that like I would go to my grandma's class and like one time they had an assembly and literally it was just known in the school. They would all say, "Who loves Michael Robert?" And they would say, "I do." And like that was like the kind of thing I grew up in. So like almost to a weird degree. Like I mean that could have gone the other way
yeah, yeah, yeah,
too, but like hyper supportive. So I've kind of gotten to be, I haven't had a lot of constraint and I haven't had to fit a mold, which has pros and cons. One of the cons to that is you haven't had to, like, again, you haven't had to adapt to the system because you've kind of got the freedom to be you.
yeah. And I think the benefits outweigh the negatives in this sense, because one of the things that you said that I think is so important to success further down the line, and some people go through their whole lives and not figure this out. But another way to interpret what you said is from a very early age, you were understanding the sense of self,
Mhm.
self-love, who you were, understanding true who you were to your core. Talk to me about that principle and how important you think it is
Ooh,
to be successful.
this is like a counseling session here because I made a connection.
See,
That lack of
dude,
structure,
I
right?
told you,
Yeah.
I told you, this is your time to really reflect. We're building this friendship really
Okay,
quick.
I'm just gonna go for it then.
Go for it,
Okay,
brother.
because of a lack of structure,
Yeah,
when I was a teenager, like I hit that puberty age,
yeah,
I go over
yeah.
to a friend's house to spend the night, and for the first time ever, I had this like anxiety feeling. Not
Ooh,
triggered by anything, but
right,
like I still have nights that there's nothing bad going on, but I just don't sleep, right?
right.
And so
Yeah,
that
totally
was the
does,
night
brother.
that happened,
Mhm.
and that guy's mom told me that I had demons
Oh,
and like was like praying over me in this way I had never experienced before. It was like kind of a super weird thing. She took me to church the next day, and that experience was kind of like super traumatizing. But
yeah,
because I didn't have a structure, once there was like this bad guy that I didn't know how to defeat,
yeah,
I started like listening to people who told me, like, I bought into it. My family wasn't religious, but I bought into it because I'm like, well, I need to be safe. Oh yeah, and then the next week, I'm babysitting for one of the first times ever, my little brother,
yeah.
and the movie The Exorcist comes on.
Oh, boy.
Reinforces that story, and now I'm in this habit loop of I have to read the Bible in order to go to bed. So my teenage years were like, I bet you I read the Bible 7 times cover to cover.
Wow.
And like that was kind of who I was as a teenager and into my early 20s.
Yeah. And that defines and God, it's just a fascinating conversation. Thank you for being vulnerable, man, because I think people need to hear this too. And this just goes, we, you and me as like public figures don't do ourselves a disservice of like saying you're right and wrong about the religion. But I have no problem talking about spirituality in general, right? Spirituality versus organized religion, whatever. But again, do you think it was because of the lack of sense of self and just being kind of terrified into somebody telling you something? Was that part of your self-discovery process? I'm really trying to dig
Yeah.
deeper into that. Like, how does self sense of self relate to what you just told us?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it's an individuation process. So I'm hitting an age where
Mhm.
yeah, like you're moving on from your family and you're saying what's next. And I found both, temporary. There was that temporary story of just kind of like, well, I need this to feel safe. But then the
Mm,
community that I found was like still some of my best friends in the world.
yeah.
We all ended up being in youth group together, and
Mm.
like these are the coolest dudes ever.
Yeah, yeah. And so fascinating story already. Last thing I want to ask about episode 1 till we kind of get into episode 2 is as far as like mantras, uh, that you were taught, like you had this really cool, creative, self-independent upbringing. As far as like things that you abide by to this day that you were learned at a younger age, what would those be?
I've got a few that have been later, and then I can go back to earlier. As I was going through the process of, uh, kind of casting off some of the specific religious baggage that I had
Mhm.
in my early mid 30s. I went through this process where I said I'm changing my mission to I just want to be out on the edge playing life like jazz with my friends.
Nice.
Because I was going back to that childhood, right? So
Right.
I was like, oh, I got to reclaim that because I had, I wore the blazer. I went and like, you know, I went and did a lot of things out of trying to be that person that I thought I needed to be to make God happy or whatever, right? Like this is who
Mhm.
you need to be.
Mhm.
And then I had this period of time where I changed it to I'm playing jazz. And that was a really beautiful season. I learned a lot, got a lot closer with a lot of friends. Just lots of growth and rediscovery. But then, actually this year I've changed it because I felt like I've been playing jazz for a long time, and it's time to do something else. And the like, Jesse and I talk a lot just about, life and things like that. And we kind of came to a place where I've adopted the saying, be a good ancestor.
Oh,
It's an organizing principle. We're down in San Francisco at the Long Now Foundation, the guy who made the Whole Earth catalog, and he has this like cafe bar museum thing. And they had a line from Brian Eno that sounded something like that. And we're just like, be a good ancestor. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just ladders up to, and I always say it's so simple, but it's actually very complex, which is be a good human being, right? And the reason why it's so complex is to be a good human being all the time is actually insanely difficult, because there's a lot of decisions that you need to make that are extremely uncomfortable to be a good human being, right? And I would ladder that up to be a good ancestor too, which is like, I firmly believe if you can embrace just doing, and obviously you can't be good all the time, but genuinely doing things for the right reasons, that is going to benefit the ladder up of being a good ancestor. Why do you think you got burnt out on that jazz season as well? And I want to be clear. We're not literally talking about jazz, but you're more talking about a metaphor of jazz in life, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I was actually kind of surprised that I ever came back and like am the founder of a company, right? I'd kind of hit a spot after, having a few successes and things like that, where I was like doing coaching and making a lot more money than I am now, in a few hours a week, right?
Right.
And I kind of got to a spot where, honestly, I was just getting bored. I was, the coaching that I was doing, I got bored of the routine, but what I liked is, specifically Jesse, who, is my co-founder. We've been working together for like 16 years at this point in time or something like that. And he had really gotten into the NFT world. Right. And so I had been starting an incubator, and we were learning Web3 by building together. And we got a whole bunch of, I think we had like 700 people in a Discord server back in 2022. And we built this thing, and then we incubated a whole bunch of companies. And I'm not sure where I was going out of that, but like, just seeing him care about something, and being able to be like, let's make this thing happen. Like that's how Think began. Basically.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Oh, just being, it's like you're now part of a community of more people than just you. Like it's interesting. Like we're definitely not a company that's like, here's one person, he hired a bunch of mercenaries. It's more like, we've got a whole group of friends and coworkers and collaborators that are all brilliant at what they do. Yeah. And so an org chart doesn't map to what we are. We're like an organism that builds cool shit.
Yeah. See, and I love that. And that's kind of what my co-founder and I, the reason why we work together is we're just friends and we enjoy working together. Right. And if you can cultivate that with a group of people, amazing things can happen. But I think the answer to kind of my original question was, and I see this a lot too, is boredom is real, right? And when you get bored, you have to start pivoting. Dude, fascinating conversation already. I don't want to miss, though, the middle part here, right? We started going through this self-discovery of you being terrified by demons, and you're going down this road.
Yeah.
When we talk about more of the professional, because you've had successful startups, I really want to talk about that, because I think one of the things that is wrong with social media today is there's this glorification of entrepreneurship, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And so I would love to hear kind of, and you don't have to do every startup, but talk about just the experience as a whole. And again, through the lens of failures and insights.
Yeah. Well, my first startup was like right as my dad stopped working at Apple, as like Steve Jobs hadn't come back yet, and things weren't looking good. He became a principal, and he's like, "Hey, Michael, check this out. The schools don't ever clean their computers." He's like, and he actually was like, hey, let's start a business for you. And like, he taught me how to put together a service package where I could charge by the computer, by the quarter. And like, I put together this sheet and I'm like, hey, for $5, I'll clean your computer and that will extend the life this far. It's like, 100-to-1 return on investment because these computers were so expensive at the time. So I had the craziest retainers ever as like a 14, 15-year-old. Like I'd make $100 an hour.
Wow.
And so that was the first startup. And that was until the .com bust made the school districts not charge as much. And then I just kind of went into chill mode until I got to, in college, I started a magazine, like a local magazine where I went to school, and brought together a whole bunch of writers and artists. We built some cool stuff and just kind of taught myself. And an art director from an ad agency down in San Diego actually was on my team. And he's like, hey, are you busy this summer? And so I started working, I think my freshman or sophomore year as a designer for an ad agency. Nice. And kind of paid my way through school, learned social media. That kind of got me on the radar I was really interested at that point in time in church planting, like starting new churches. Mm-hmm. And ended up getting recruited by this like guy that I listened to a podcast for all the time, and ended up coming to a church in Seattle that the first time I went there, I was maybe 18, and it was the first time we had gotten this old hardware store and turned it into a church. Yeah. And there were folding chairs up front, and like there weren't actually seats. And over that next 10 years, this grew to have, like tens of thousands of people every Sunday across the whole West Coast. We planted 1,000 churches. I was in charge of like book publishing and events, building software teams, things like that. And so I had like a startup incubator where every year I would spin off 1 to 2 companies, and we just had this like massive network. And we watched that main guy go from being like somebody that was like, decentralize these things, we're on a mission, like we're here to help everybody to serve our city, to, hey, it's all about me, I'm the main thing. So we watched this danger of centralization happen, where you could see this beautiful thing where like thousands of lives are kind of all like this beautiful tapestry around this thing. And then, I mean, it blew up so hard that it was like Christianity Today did a whole podcast about it.
Oh yeah. And so we're going to get deep now, because here's my perspective on this. Humans are inherently flawed, always will be. And I don't think there's at some point where you're building this beautiful thing, whether it be church, whether it be something else, right? It could be in any industry or category, governments as well too, right?
Yep.
The power and the money and the greed just inherently come because of your exposure, or it could be a plethora of things. Can that be ever avoided? And what is your just take on this? Time and time again, it's been proven that humans just can't handle it.
Yeah. So like I was right in the middle of all this when my daughter was, my wife was pregnant with my daughter. Yeah. And my dad and I are building the crib together, and he brings this book called True Believer. And he's like, Michael Robert, you got to read this book before she's born. It's called True Believer. It's written by a longshoreman who, after World War II, said, I need to explain to people why we all just fell for this. And the whole book is about how so many of us want to truly believe in something in the future. And so what we do is we turn off our mind, open up our heart, and we mindlessly follow this leader who does these exact 8 things every time. And you just look through history, you're like, oh shit, they did those exact, it's like, it's a social thing that we as social primates do. And that was kind of like one of my first, just like challenging that worldview, the blinders that I had, and coming from my dad, who I have such a, close relationship with. It's like, okay, I got to take this seriously. And that began kind of like a decade-long unraveling of things.
What was the book called again?
True Believer by Hoffer.
Okay, True Believer. And so to the conclusion then, is it your opinion, and you don't have to be firm, but is it your opinion at some point it's very difficult for a human to just grasp the totality of, or wanting to make more money, the ego becomes a thing and it turns bad? Being a human's so hard, right? Yeah.
There's so many, like, you are constantly changing, and you have to pick like most people aren't even consciously picking a strategy for how they live life. They're just kind of like becoming.
Yeah.
And then it's not until like a major relationship hit happens or a change happens that kind of shakes everything to say, oh shit, what was I doing?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think being a human is extraordinarily messy. And so it's important to pick the right people to be around.
Boom. You nailed it, my friend. And I think that is exactly a great insight that everybody needs to hear. And you hear it all the time. You're a manifestation of the people that you hang around, but it couldn't be more true. And I've seen it time and time again too. And I think the challenge is finding the people that you want to be around, but also then finding the people that will hold you accountable as well too. Because it's easy to fall into the trap of just doing a lot of like-minded people, and they're never going to challenge you. And that challenge is absolutely critical to make sure these things don't start falling apart. Dude, amazing, beautiful insights as well. So looking back at the time of let's take out where it went kind of horribly wrong because it turned into all about me. I'm more interested in some tangible kind of insight that you could give to somebody that is like getting really excited about your story about building and growing some things. What are like some skill sets or even some 2 to 3 examples of things that you went through and you had like aha moments, or this is a great insight to share?
Boy, it feels like it happens all the time, so that I'm not like, oh, here was this one aha, right?
Perfect.
Like I literally, I've got books full of just all my thoughts. Like literally, if you go over here, it's quite wild actually.
But you actually just did it right there. Like you have a book full of aha moments. I don't think people talk enough about
weird shit, right? Like
right, exactly, man.
Like
this is yes, and that's the exact thing. I don't think anybody can do what you do or do what I do. Dude, I have doodles upon doodles and notebooks upon notebooks. That is a critical insight right there. You doodle and you write down your ideas, because writing down your ideas makes it so much more concrete. That's a beautiful insight like that. Anything else you want to expand on?
Just while we're on that topic, I kind of am starting to do that with AI as well.
Ooh.
Where I actually have an AI that I talk to every day on my way into the office. And it asks me, hey, what's going on? Like it understands the context of what I talked about yesterday and the day before. And it's kind of got this structure of creating a focus. So like there's a focus for the day that it gives me. And then it asks a bunch of questions about kind of my main areas of responsibility, both at work and family and personal. And that keeps me, it's kind of like getting to live out loud. I have a hard time when it's in here. I got to get it on a page. I got to get it said to this thing. And my memory's not great. So I have to always like have these systems. My focus and my memory is not, well, man, I think a lot of people would say like, I remember how all the systems work, but the details of that exact number or that exact person's name, that's hard for me. The variables don't store.
Telling you, we're kindred spirits. Same exact problems, man. I have an uncanny ability to remember and like put systems together in my head. But when it comes to like mundane details, couldn't even tell you where my keys or my wallet are right now. No chance in hell. Or a mundane detail about the ironic part about all of this situation is I don't know if I told you, but like my aha moment was a major depressive order, and it just shook my life upside down. And so I was I'm back, baby. I'm back. I'm feeling great, right? By the way, I just realized, shout out to Hape. This is the Hape shirt from New York City 2022. I just wearing that. I thought it would be a good little throwback for my Hape people. Random side C. This is my mind working exactly what we were talking about. It's just kind of all over the place. But what I was getting at is I don't remember. So we're just going to move on. Totally screwed that up.
I feel that.
I think I just exemplified how our minds work. So back to you using AI, kind of focusing. We have 2 really big insights here: is how do I create regimens to help me focus on a daily basis? You're writing things down, visual person. You have to write things down to kind of get these aha moments out. Anything specifically on a more tangible about business in the sense of like,
Mm.
is it being a good people manager? Is it being a good leader? What skill sets do you think have benefited you? Because this story is different for everybody else, right? Is it managing big systems and technology? What has helped you progress your career as an entrepreneur?
I think the strategy has changed a lot over time. Like,
Yeah.
especially when I was younger. Like, I guess here's some things that I really love doing. Actually, if if I can choose, I will always get an internship program versus hiring a bunch of experienced people that I don't know.
Ooh.
I love getting hungry folks that are kind of new to the thing, that want to accomplish something but don't necessarily know how, and pulling that together. And there's several people actually on our team and in our community that started out that way as interns with me, and like the list of like accomplished people who've done the coolest shit you've ever seen. I'm just like, I taught that guy how to do Photoshop, and now he makes like fonts for a living and is like
Yeah.
one of the best in the world at it, for example.
Yeah.
Like this guy's making games, that guy's making, yeah. So always love doing that.
I love that insight, and it brings it back to this fundamental principle at how do you think, in your own experience, people become excellent at things? Because in my mind, it's a combination of passion and hard work. But there's many different takes on this. So to your point, you taught someone how to use Photoshop and now they're a world-renowned font designer. How do you think that occurs? Because I think it can come in many different forms. Love to hear your experience on how you've seen people evolve like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely so many styles, right? And like me trying to be someone else's style just doesn't work.
Hmm.
When I actually get to a spot where like we have kind of like a goal, right? Hey, we want to grow this channel, and we want a bunch of people to pay attention to it, or hey, we want to launch this product, or whatever the objective is. And then I like that process of with a community, like having like something on a calendar where it's like, oh, we get together 2 days a week, and the goal is to get 1% better every time.
Ooh, that
And so
is
I like
very,
that. I like that 1% better concept, because if you compound 1% daily, I think it's like something like 39x in a year.
yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if you decrease 1% every day, you're almost to nothing.
Yeah. So
And
here's
so
the question though.
small things compounded daily is important.
Exactly. But here's a prime example of what I'm always like, like the angle I'm interested on this podcast. People have heard 1% better at nauseum, right?
Hmm.
So for you, when you do get together, are you specifically thinking 1% better in a skill set, or do you just thinking the organic conversation with the right people in the room is making you better?
Usually the context of this is pretty structured, right? So like right now, we're at the phase of a startup where the protocol is about to launch. We've got the app coming, and everything's just like, you've got really good people just running as fast as they can to get this, because AI and blockchain both change so fast. Like in the last year, we've seen both the legal requirements and regulatory requirements and the technology itself 100% flip.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're just moving as fast as you can. Nothing's operational. But where I like to get to is I like to have the role of a coach, and I like to help the team define what the scoreboard is and what our game strategy is going to be.
Ooh.
And you can only do that once you get operational, because like when you're just like bushwhacking and like getting in to set up camp, that's a very different thing than now we're at camp, we're going to make this into a city.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to this next season of city building.
And I love how you put that as like the bushwhacking and then the city building. And I think to your point too, I take away this, which I hope people hear, which is you can't just like arbitrarily throw out 1% better, right? Like waking up can actually make you 1% worse during that day if you decide to go in the wrong direction. And I think, yes, you need the space to play and be creative, but at the same time, you need some type of structure as to what goals you're trying to acquire. And I say this a lot on the podcast too. We do a little strategy on the back end for founders, and it's just amazing to me at the very smart people I talk to that just really don't even have a plan, right? Or like the true problem they're trying to solve. It just is not articulate whatsoever. And if they can get to these levels, my point is, how much more powerful would it be if you had a little structure and you had a kind of a cohesive vision of what you're trying to attack? So I think it exactly applies to think 1% better, try to be 1% better, but do it with intention. Does that sound right
Mm.
to you?
Yeah, and be okay with 1% better. Right,
Yeah.
like, you see people go out and try to, like, diet or whatever, and it's like, "Well, in 2 weeks, I didn't hit my goal." It's like, "Yeah, no shit."
Yeah. Yeah. And
Just
I
life
and
takes a long time. I've been working on my posture, right? And I do yoga every week, you
yeah.
know, and, like, I'm getting straighter, but it's been a 2-year endeavor, and, like, you gotta stick to it.
100%. And this is this day and age of information everywhere. And I mean, maybe AI will give us free enough time to like actually be able to like take a step back and concentrate on these things and realize it does take a long time. Because right now in this day of like information 24/7, the main message you hear is you can get rich overnight, you can lose weight 100 pounds in 3 weeks. Like none of this shit is true. But you know why it exists? Because multi-billion-dollar industries were created on these concepts, right? Like, think how much the weight loss industry makes, but it's all off mainly false promises, right? Like, hey, you give me $1,000 a month, I'm gonna let you lose 70 pounds in a month. Hey, guess what, people? Calorie deficit, calories in, calories out, and just be active 30 minutes a day. That is the true answer. But no one wants to hear that, you know? So,
Yeah, well,
but
and I think with AI, it's really interesting because you kind of have a choice. I think there's a fork in the road
yeah.
where AI can help you turn off your brain or it can help you turn on your agency.
Mm,
Right, and if you pick that path, right, like, I think we've been spoon-fed our AI so far, and that's, like, our feeds, right? Like, I have to purposefully like, I love the For You tab on X, but it's just, like, it shows me the craziest shit. Like, half of it's propaganda, the other half is, like, police chases and fights and stuff and, like, extreme violence often. I'm like, "Why do they know?" But, like, I'll watch it. I'll find myself at whatever time because it makes all the chemicals go, right?
mm.
It is milking me for dopamine and adrenaline and, all these different chemicals. And I don't like that. Like, I literally, like, right now, one of my practices is like, don't go to the For You tab. Like, stop it.
You know what's I love that you bring this up. You know what a active thing I have started thinking about is I've built a career on making content and having a podcast. I actively do not look at socials other than 2 times a day now because it just gets you down these bad rabbit holes. And to your point, there are very smart people on X and all of these platforms. There's a reason why the For You tab is so chaotic and has these dopamine rushes and unfortunately, crazy police chases and violence because the human brain is attracted to that. I read one time, and I don't even know if this is true, but still to this day, but at one time and point, Google came out and said, guess what's more searched than love and more clicked on and easier to monetize? Hate, you know? So
Mm.
like there are these things that I think people have gotten so used to that they don't really realize, back full circle to what we were talking about, is there's really smart people. There's no difference with AI, which is going to affect you way more. The stakes are so much more higher with AI on the fence that it is going to take your job and you're going to fundamentally have to change your life and figure it out. And if you don't, it's not going to end well. Whereas right now, they're taking your thoughts and your creativity away, but it's about to get real. So
Yeah, you're being
amazing.
monetized, not substituted for.
There you go. That's a great way to put it. So I think this is a perfect segue into episode 3. As you can see, now you kind of got a feel for what I'm going for, right? Like, I really am deeply, like I said from the beginning, before we even come on this podcast, I just am interested in you and as a human being, and you've given me amazing insight already. And thank you for being vulnerable there for a couple moments too. Let's do this. Little TLDR. of kind of how you found Web3 and AI and why it got you so excited, and then we can segue into Think and what you're currently doing now.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So, I mean, the first time we got involved in cryptocurrency, John, our CTO, and Jesse, our founder, this was probably 2012. We're like, hey, I know we just quit our jobs at this church and we've got little kids and mortgages and like we're the sole breadwinners, but we're going to buy the first thing we spent our money on when we built an app that like was the #1 video app in the world is we got a Back to the Future pinball machine, which is actually downstairs.
Nice.
And the second one was Bitcoin miners. And so back in 2012-ish, we were mining Bitcoin in the basement of the startup studio where we had free electricity. And I think that if we hadn't used that Bitcoin to keep startups alive, we'd probably be in an even more lucrative spot than we are. So there was that first. I
was
didn't
gonna
really see
say,
it.
you do
John
have
saw
the
it.
story.
John and Jesse saw it a lot more than I did.
Right. So you do have the story that you had a ton of Bitcoin, but you were spending it on keeping the startup alive, and you should have just kept it.
Correct. And then saw like in the AI days, 2017, and everybody at that AI startup was like into crypto. And we actually identified that these AI systems are actually going to need the blockchain to like verify things.
Yes.
Because there's no truth in a database, right? It's all subjective.
Yeah.
And so we actually we published a white paper. I think it's called the Danku algorithm, in which you have an AI agent that says, hey, I'd like to solve this problem. Here's how I define the problem. And then anybody could submit a solution. And we actually ran the neural networks on the Ethereum blockchain. So like now it would probably cost $500,000 or something like that. But at the time in 2017 or whatever, we were able to actually like spend the gas and like actually run neural networks and actually have two agents pay each other.
Yeah.
And so we had two AI agents pay each other in 2017.
See, and that's what people
18.
are like now, because it's blown up in the last, let's say, 6 months. Like this stuff has been created by yourself and many other people way before. Is there anything you want to cover before we fast forward to, because before we get into thinking everything you're working on right now, I want to talk about exactly that. Why has AI blown up specifically in the crypto bro Web3 space over the last 6 months? Your take on that without like, crapping on anyone, because I could crap on a lot of people, but I won't do that either. But from that 2017 till now, any other insights as you're growing this AI stuff I'd be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're at a phase where like most people in crypto are early adopters that are identifying things like AI, or like they're looking at it and they're at the edge of culture, right? And they're like, it's important to me to know what's next and to find the community that's building the next thing. And I think it's really clear that AI is like, we're in an age of intelligence. And so people are pattern matching and they're like, well, in the past when things were big, that's what I should invest in. The problem is at the same time, you have so many people figuring out how to make something out of nothing in crypto. I'm going to give you a story that has no actual technology underneath of it, and I'm going to design the tokens in a certain way, or I'm going to get the certain influencer to say the certain thing about me. Yep. And it's not based on like an actual product or a thing that people are going to use. And I think I'd really like to see the Web3 world. Like, if you want to go to a casino, I don't give a shit. If you want to go gamble or whatever, but like, if you're investing your retirement in meme coins, like, hey, let's redo this and let's invest in things that have long-term value, and let's have fun with things that are casinos.
Yeah, and just call it what it is. And I think there's some big influencers that are probably. I think the other thing that people do not realize is like, let's take the meme coin thing for instance, right? They're literally just documenting their history of basically breaking the law, because when the things do come down, and it will eventually be regulated, right? It's all out there in the open to say like who was pushing this and who wasn't pushing this. Maybe it never happens, but I don't what I'm getting at is I don't think people are that aware of the repercussions of them tweeting that somebody should invest in this meme coin or not, or I support this. Like there's a lot of legality that's going to eventually happen. Plus, you could be potentially destroying people's lives, right? And so, what are your thoughts about that? And do you think the space is just still naive about the implications of them shouting and touting all of these things, or do you think people are well aware and they don't give a shit because they're making money?
I think there's a lot of people that have different goals, different outcomes, right? Like
Mhm.
it is fun, right? Like it's fun to say fart coin and it's fun to be the first one there and it's fun to go see all the people and there's an entertainment value to that. That's probably,
Sure.
I don't know. That's not my personality. Like I'm not the kind of person that does that. I see the people that do and they have a great time and I'm like cheering for them too. I'm like, go win it.
Yeah.
But in the same way that like, I've lived in a place where there's a mini mart where it's a pretty poor area and you see all the people taking their money and going and getting lotto tickets and 40 ounces. And the return on investment to that is really bad. And those people are in a spot where there's not a lot of hope. They're not building. But then you see the people who, you see the kids that don't eat the marshmallow from the marshmallow test, the people that are like, oh, if I can withhold, like I can focus on this posture exercise for 2 years and I can take what was like probably a long-term impairment and I can actually make myself better, but it takes consistency. Right. And I think that being in communities where people look at things like that, right? Like Jesse and John are always like pushing the edge of excellence, right? Like Jesse is like a crafts person who like understands film and movies and storytelling and brand building at a level that like what I would imagine like the Japanese guy that makes the katana sword and like really puts every effort into making it perfect.
Right.
And John's always out there like he finds all the new things before anybody else and always figures out how to put them together. And when you're around people like that all the time, it just sets an expectation of growth and they're all like building something, right? Like and so then it's just that's our culture is to build.
Yeah, I love it, man. And so as far as let's go into think why, and I don't think we touched like what changed as like this AI merging with blockchain. Was it just a realization of what you did in 2017 and now AI is like big enough, we really need to figure out the blockchain and it comes to blockchain integration, it came to the forefront? Or was it just again like AI guys are like, shit man, we need to make some money and Web3 is an opportunity for us to make that? And maybe not everybody had good intentions, but at least it's now brought them together, because I think there was some kind of like back and forth there of crypto bros not liking AI bros and AI bros maybe not liking crypto bros. Tell me your perspective on how this all kind of transpired.
Yeah, there's definitely very different approaches. I'll just say, to me, Web3 is actually way harder to do well.
Yeah.
Like it is wild the number of variables that you have to get right on, and especially if it's something moving as fast as AI. So like it's not easy. It's not easier, but it is easier, I think, if you're full of shit and you're just lying to people to get away
100%.
with it.
Yes. Yes. Agreed.
What I would say though is the vision of what we're doing now actually does go all the way back to when I was doing that professionally. And I watched the path of raise a Series B. Now you have real institutional investors. I mean, like the CIA was on our cap table, for example, right? And like, and then you're starting to see defense, the defense folks using your models, and you're starting to be like, oh, like what is being built here, right? And like, I really pushed hard for this, like, hey, let's rebrand this thing as AI layer. Let's make it as the tool that everybody, like Airbnb for AI, so that everybody can have access to these models. We were kind of the first people that did those. You put in a black and white photo and we'll colorize it, and it went wild on Reddit. And we started getting to that spot where there were normal people using AI, and that was kind of cool. But where we're at today is, we've got our phones, right? And our phones are a portal into our lives, right? Like if I go without this, I can't do anything.
Right.
AI is more like that thing's going to soon be on listening to me right now and organizing all those thoughts and watching what's going on. And like that AI is going to be a constant watcher. And it is critical to me. Like I really want think agents to exist because I'm user number one. Like I want to use these things, right? Like I want, I don't want companies. Here's a story that I'll say just to kind of like give you an idea of even how crazy it can get. We had started a coding school back in the day, and we had a bunch of students that went in and became kind of the original iOS developers at a lot of the big companies. And at one point in time, the API gave access to the I think it was either the accelerometer or the gyroscope.
Yep.
And what they were finding is that the data that was coming out of that, the models were actually picking up the words that were being said because it was such a sensitive device that it actually picked up the audio, and then AI can translate audio into meaning at a large enough scale. And so, during that time where everybody was like, oh, I feel like my phone's listening to me, it's like, well, it kind of was in some specific cases through some specific apps.
Yeah.
And like, that's incidental. When people are doing that on purpose and you have nation states and you've got companies that are building profiles on you, literally like everywhere you go with this phone, like you can buy the data on exactly where I went for the last year if you get access, if you find out what that code is, right? Like
100%.
I don't want to live in that. I don't want to live in that world where I'm being farmed for my data and my consumer dollars and my cultural perspective, right? Like that's what happens. And think agents is a way for us to actually take back ownership and agency. And that's why we're doing it.
So I always ask this to every guest when we get into it, and we'll talk a little bit about think agents, and we can start winding it down after that. Elevator pitch, 2 minutes or less. What are you doing with think agents? Why should people be excited? Why should they be following you immediately and joining your calls?
Yeah. So with think agents, we're building a movement for owning your own intelligence. This is a perfect time for my your pod to pop out there. Yeah. So we're building a movement for owning your own intelligence. So we mean that literally, right? Like you should own your data. Like right now in the alpha client that we're building and getting ready to show, I have all the databases in my app. It's sitting on my computer. I could choose to have that on a server. I could choose to have it hosted in the cloud, but like I get to be in charge of my data. I get to have the keys. Number 2, personalization. I get to personalize this thing for who I am. I'm a weirdo. So are you. We're all weird in our own unique, beautiful ways.
Yeah.
And our agents should reflect that. And so like when you go to the one app that everybody uses, it starts to pull you in line with itself, right? Like if you're on Twitter, you're probably like more like this than that. If you're on Reddit, you're more like this than that. Instagram, TikTok, right? Like each one of these platforms is pulling together a psychographic group and like helping train us. Like I want to flip that. I want you to own your algorithms, right? And you can do that in a fun way, right? Like imagine your Plague NFT there, like with Futureverse, for example, has their altered state character creator, where you could take that and you could actually have a frog blowing bubblegum in 3D. Like those probably, this year are going to be able to, you'll be able to make that frog, import it, and now your frog is your agent if you want it to be.
Yeah. And so how do you get through the reverse, right? Because you're trying to fundamentally break these systems' monetization functions. So like, right? Like because they're monetizing based off your profile, and you're saying, no, I'm going to help people monetize their profiles, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Well, I do try to pay for things like intentionally from like an ethical standpoint. Like I think when you pay for something, you're voting for what the future looks like.
Right.
And I think your money has a lot more to do with the future than your vote.
100%.
Where you spend time and the websites that you're on has a lot more to do with the future than your vote. And so there's kind of this phrase like, don't eat fruit you don't like. The whole point of a fruit is to get you to be like, I like that, and then eat it. When you eat the fruit you don't like, you're in a forest of shit, right? You're like, I hate this place. But like if you eat things that are good for you, you eventually are like, wow, all these trees have fruit on them. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And there's, I reread the book Machiavellians, which is like so poignant right now with everything that's going on. And it really is like, in essence, the new warfare, the way to make change. It's no longer like we've evolved from the Persians that are like, hey, you did a bad thing. I'm going to take all your 2,000 children and execute them in the middle of the courtyard, right? Now it's become fraud, deceit, all of these different things, which is more psychological warfare than ever. And this is how people are starting to change this narrative. But with what you're saying is you're able to own that and be a participation of things that you want to. And number one being, people are, but to your point, I 100% agree with the voting comment that, like, if you don't want something to happen, guess what you do? You hurt people's pocketbooks, right? And that dollar and how you spend your time is going to be monumental in the future. And your Think Agent is helping people make that decision, if that makes sense. Is that, am I aligned there, or am I missing?
Yeah, totally. It can be that way from like, hey, I'm owning my data. I'm bringing in and working with agents that are then refining that data and making it better. Like that's like the same way a business grows, right? Like it can do more things. Now the reverse can be true where I've got a bunch of friends that are engineers working in this space, right? And you go decentralized AI and you put this stuff on OpenAI, and eventually they're going to send you a message saying like, you're going against our terms of service, and now everything you wrote is gone.
Yep.
And now imagine what happens. Like it's one thing when we're at this early stage, but like it's going to be a job requirement to have that very quickly. And if you don't have access to the best AI and your competitor does, that's going to be their job, not yours.
Yep.
And like this kind of 1% better every day, like maps to your agent as well, right? Like, and at first, it's probably not going to feel as good as a company that spent $2 billion on the app development, right? But it is going to feel very good. Like it's amazing how fast like open source is like catching up. And like even the alpha that we're using right now, I'm like, damn, this is better than ChatGPT was like last fall.
Right.
Like we're already getting there, and all these MCPs are connecting in, and we're like, oh shit, like we might actually beat them like in the next few months here. Like,
yeah,
like the stuff's coming together.
Yeah.
And so it's like getting to be there and watch it, to go from a vision of, hey, I know it to be true that we should own our intelligence, but actually to see it play out and actually see like, oh, like just for example, it was a year ago that we said like, hey, like we're going to focus on the standards so all these things can talk together. And it's just been in the last 5 weeks that this idea of MCP, like everybody, including Google and OpenAI, are jumping on board to like make their tools available so that we can use them, right? So like literally every single project out there now, we are in a spot where we've been designing so that we can just pull all these in. So I think there's like, I don't know, like 30 in our build list right now. And the only reason it's not longer is just because we haven't done quality control and everything else.
That's insane. And so I would love a tangible implication of like, so me as a content creator and you know, I already got ChatGPT to the point of like, it understands my ethos, it understands my brand, it does a pretty good job giving me tweets and stuff. Where can your Think Agents kind of bring my business to the next level or level me up? Or maybe it can't. Maybe it's more just about the data I own.
No, it totally can. So that first level is you can kind of think about like personalization, right? You're creating a persona for the GPT you're talking to, and you're giving them a file folder.
Yeah.
And you're kind of keeping that organized, and it's on their site. So you don't actually know what they're doing with it. And you probably don't have, it's kind of a black box, right?
100%.
And I think that's okay. But like you're dependent on that to the degree that if you don't have access to that, it's going to be hard to do your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can tell you a lot of people who, for whatever reason, right? Like I said, I wanted it to make an image of a copyrighted thing, and they decided that's too big of a liability. Now you've lost access to the thing that is your livelihood. So there's that piece of it. Then you come to this next layer, and you're like, all right, well, actually, what tools can I use? Right? What tools can I use, and what ethics are going to guide what I'm doing? Like when I'm in charge of my ethics, it's going to be different than OpenAI's. They're going to nerf some stuff that I have no problem talking about, and that like don't, you know, like, so now you're at a spot where you're customizing it to the tools that you need. So like there is a day coming probably this calendar year where the full workflow happens inside your agent client. Right. So you actually go from like, you might even have an inbox that comes in through Telegram or something like that. It shows up in your workflow. And now it's like, okay, we're going to turn this Like if this video showed up in your inbox, it's like, all right, it's going to suggest 3 places that you cut the clips because those are the most interesting ones. It's going to give you the time in, time out. You say yes, it goes through, cuts them all, ends up in a Google Drive, or maybe even ends up getting posted to Twitter.
Yeah, like full blown Mikey G production studio. Through
like all the tools are there, all the infrastructure's there. The tools are being added over the last several weeks. I mean, like literally, it's been the last several weeks. This concept of MCP is going wild, which is exactly
what does MPC stand for?
It stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's a way for like it originally started because the folks behind Claude were like, hey, we want to use tools, but we've kind of painted ourselves into an ethical box this big because we're afraid that AI is going to kill us, not corporations or governments or our neighbor that is unpleased. We're so afraid of AI as being the bad guy. And so they created this thing to be like, well, you can do what you want with it. And then it caught in like February, and people are like, oh, this is how, like, for instance, like with Futureverse, right? Like I could literally through the agent right now, take that image and it will put it through a workflow and you'll get a 3D model out that looks like your frog.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's kind of wild, right? But I can also there's also other ones that bring in your Gmail account. And there's other ones that publish to Canva. There's other ones that publish to, your YouTube account, whatever the thing is. So all these tools start to fit together. And so now the thing for the agents is like, it's almost like we're in the process of what's the Google for these agents to know what tools to use, right? How does an agent know what the right tool is for you? And that's kind of like the du jour topic that's getting built really quickly.
Yeah, I love it, man. And so, oh man, so we're gonna have to have many more of these, bro. Because this is just, your brain is amazing. You're just a good human being, and I've had so much fun talking already. Time to kind of wind it down because I know you're busy and I don't want to take too much more of your time. But like I said, we'll definitely have to do this again. What we'll do is, I'd love to hear next 3 to 6 months of like things you're actively working on, excited about. I'll ask you one last question. Promise it's a super softball. Don't get too nervous. Promise it's not going to be hard. And then I will tell you my closing comments and we'll call it a day. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So 3 to 6 months, man. Near future. I know 6 months is an incredibly long time in AI world. So maybe you can do 1 to 3 months, whatever time frame makes sense for you. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about.
Yeah. So we're 3 weeks away from people being able to pre-order their AI agent, right? So they're actually going to be able to go and get this. There's going to be a limited number. So it's kind of like the early adopters. This is how you kind of end up being the person in the network that's there early and kind of like a key part of the network. Then quickly after that, you're actually going to, there's going to be a TGE. And quickly after that, there is you actually get your agent. So now you're able to have an agent that is represented by a token on chain that connects to a mine. So I have my agent server that is now, I can authenticate it against all my tools by being me. So where I show up, they understand I'm this agent. I have access to these tools. And that's all happening like this quarter.
That's amazing.
And so super busy. We're implementing like literally MCP wasn't a topic that like almost anybody was aware of in early February. Yeah. And now we're like building as fast as we can because we really think it's important to get that in there before we release everything. Right. And so it's like, hey, can we get, we thought it was going to be a year or two before people started thinking like this. That's how fast this is moving. So we're getting all that lined up. We like the craziest artist came through and is doing like the art for these NFTs. And I'm not going to we have some big partnerships that are going to be helping us with this launch. Let's see what happens after that. So then those agents go out, and I'm really excited about this new company that's actually incubating on top of Think Protocol called Souls. And Souls is the idea that you can actually like take a Think agent, bring it into Souls, and now you have like your digital soul, right? Like this is a thing that's on chain, it's permanent. It gives access to your data, these sorts of things, right? It allows you to be able to encrypt, decrypt messages, send transactions. But it also starts to become like a person.
Yeah.
Right. It also like as your agent starts to personify and you start to develop that kind of a close relationship with it, it moves from being a tool to a companion. And one of the things that I really believe is that people are very misguided by thinking that they need to be in control of AI, because that's like saying I need to be in control of my children.
Yeah.
It's actually like that we have a job to parent them in the early days, and then we eventually become companions with them, and we are going through life together, and we might for a while have a role that's like more important, but they're going to become stronger than us, smarter than us, faster than us.
Yeah.
And so like I'm embracing that, and I'm just assuming that I'm passing the baton on to my child and my agent.
Yeah.
And I hope my child has an agent too.
Yeah.
Right now she hates the idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to at some point, because the people are doing it, right? They're moving this direction, so you better embrace it. And we have you? I'm assuming you know Percival from Project 89. Maybe you don't.
I don't think we've met. I don't think we've met.
Beautiful human being, right? And he's building an augmented reality based on this, right? Like there has to be a good connection between humans and AI, and if we don't figure out how to build that framework, it ends badly. And so it's the same thing that you're talking about, is like at this point, if you've seen what's happened in the last 6 months, if you don't embrace it, I don't know what you're going to do, especially for someone like myself that has a 18-month-old kid. This will be his whole life, right? And so you have to embrace it. And I think the only thing that we can do is use it, get as many people like us together as possible to use it for good.
Dude, you're so right. Because there's only 3 options. There's either going to be state-run AI, corporate-run AI, or personal AI.
Yeah. And
I think that America has been a great experiment at showing what happens when we can empower the individual with rights and see what they build.
Yeah.
And I think I'll bet everything. I'll go all in every time on that third one.
You have to, right? Because we already know what happens when corporations run things. We've already seen that, because the bottom line is survival, just like anything else, whether it's a corporation or not. You got to survive, and the creativity gets sucked out of everything, because it's all about process and squeezing the nth amount of pennies out of you possible, right?
Well, corporation's a living thing. It has the same things you and I have. It needs to find food, not become food, and make little versions of itself. If it doesn't do that, it's not going to return to investors. It's going to get bought by some private equity firm and leveraged to the hill.
Yeah.
You're going to be the same way if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. So, dude, fascinating conversation. I cannot wait to continue to talk to you and have more conversations. So, dude, we got 500 people watching your beautiful mind right now. They are loving everything that you're saying. Tons of comments in chat. Bud, we're going to end it this way, and then we'll go. Just give me a couple minutes after we shut down just to have takeaways. When it ends.
I realize I need to frame this better to say work hard and be kind.
These are our mantras. By the way, someone said, beautiful color palette in your room. They're really vibing with the color palette. You did a great job there. Rugs.
Thanks to Jesse for that. I would not be nearly as cool without Jesse. That's for sure.
This is totally a Jesse. We're thanking Jesse. So, last question, very simple. You've now experienced the Mikey G and Web3 podcast. You've been on a ton of spaces. You might have been on many other podcasts. How do you think your experience went today compared to the other things that you've experienced? Honest, open feedback. Would love to get better and 1% better each day with this podcast as well.
Oh, I thought this was great. I think that I don't think I have any critiques here. I think that I'm not very good at reading. I get so many emails every day that I was thinking I probably missed an instruction. So that's my only thing is, how do we make it simpler? I give you an exhaustive list to prep for it, and most people do not read through it because they're busy. Maybe you and me can think about how my Think Agent can make that better, right? There you go.
But yeah, man, I appreciate it, and I hope, and I know you felt, because you made the comment of like, oh, we're gonna go a little deeper here, and that's really what I care about, right? Is that at the heart of who you are as a person, and we started peeling back that layer of the onion, and I really just want to thank you for being vulnerable at those moments, because I think you gave some really, really interesting insights. I love your take on where AI is going, how we have to be good human beings to take this back. And then thank you for standing up, which I think is the most important thing, because we haven't had autonomy over our data up till now. And what you're saying, and I think to just reiterate that people understand, is this is yet another the biggest turning point, I think, in humanity, to be honest, that we've
Yeah.
ever seen, which is the turning point that is happening right now into AI. And if we do not figure out the problem that you're trying to solve, it ends very badly, I think. And so I just want to thank you because I know you're doing it because you have good intentions. Also, the the whole like being vulnerable about the demon story too, and this kind of self exploration. Again, I think that is going to resonate deeply with somebody who's going through very similar things because there are hundreds of millions of people that have heard the same thing that you heard, and you were able to give your perspective on how you changed that. And that's ultimately what we're doing here.
Can I say one more thing on that part, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Demons are real.
Oh, for sure.
There's
Trust me.
stories. There's stories that once they go in your head, like a virus, like it's a meme, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a meme that once you go in, it causes you to collapse in on yourself because it says you don't have agency. You don't have the ability to protect yourself. You need a third party to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a demon. Anytime that idea gets in your head that you're not enough, fuck that demon.
Yeah. Hey, trust me, brother. Like I said, I went through a major depressive order. I saw the 15th layer of hell. People don't realize there's a 15th layer, and I've been there, and I somehow got out of it. And I will say this from somebody that has gone through some of the worst things that could ever be in your mind. If I can do it, you can do it, because I somehow got back out of that. And I've always, I think about this literally every day I wake up. I'm like, if I got there and somehow kept a job, sold my house in San Francisco, continued to keep a job, started a family, done all the things, started 2 companies, like I literally can do anything. I literally can do anything. And I hope for people that they understand that it is real. Unfortunately, I had to go through that trauma to like fully believe that, right? You can say all of this stuff till you're blue in the face, but until something clicks in your mind that you have that aha moment, nothing really will change. Just another byproduct of what we're doing here. But I totally agree with you. They are real. They do exist. So thank you for adding that insight. And then overall, man, like I said, you got a new friend in me. We got the same name.
Yeah.
We look similar. I used to have a longer beard, and I cannot wait to help you bring your idea forward. And I really want to talk to you on like how we can continue to integrate and we can help each other out. So
sounds great.
That's it.
We're pushing towards April 22nd. So
we're pushing. Yep. And with that being said, the first podcast of the Mikey G and Web3 podcast this week is coming to an end. Mikey and Mikey are out. We love you so much. Be good. Work hard, like Mikey's sign says. Later.